The 2022 election is now over, with the Republicans winning the House and Democrats maintaining control of the Senate. However, besides the changes in Congress, there have also been a number of key state updates that I have to tell you guys about, and they're all tax related. These tax updates came as the result of voters either approving or rejecting certain tax policy changes in various states across the nation. In total, 14 states voted on tax policies. So in this video, I'm going to go over all of the most important tax updates from the election and explain everything you need to know about them. And I'm going to go over each state that was changed or that might be important to you. So let's dive in. All right, guys, I'm going to start off with the very first state that made some changes, Alabama. Alabama voters approved Amendment 6 on the election day. This amendment allows cities and towns to collect a special property tax and use money from this tax to pay as they go for construction projects. Now, this prevents them from having to go into debt to fund these projects, or hopefully that's what they're planning on. Let's jump over to the next state, Arizona. There were 3 tax propositions on the ballot in Arizona from the midterm elections. The first was Proposition 130. Proposition 130 amends the Arizona consultation to consolidate and clarify various provisions on property tax exemptions and allows the state legislature to set requirements for and limit on exemptions for widows or widowers and people with disabilities, including veterans. This proposition was passed by voters. Now, the next one was Proposition 132. This happened also in the state of Arizona. This proposition states that any ballot initiative or referendum or proposed constitutional amendment to approve a tax would become law if it is approved by a 60% majority vote as opposed to a simple majority vote. Okay, so they changed it from just a majority vote to at least 60%. Now, Proposition 132 was also passed, and that was in the state of Arizona. The next one that I want to go over with the state of Arizona is going to be Proposition 310. Proposition 310 would have increased state sales tax by 0.1% in Arizona for 20 years to provide additional funding for fire districts. Now, this one failed, and so it did not become law. I just wanted to make sure I shared this with you guys because this one was a little scary for me, right? Increasing sales tax already. So it did not pass, and it was going to be 0.1%, and it was going to last for 20 years. Okay. So we covered Alabama. We just covered Arizona. Let's jump over to Arkansas. Now, Arkansas issued issue number 4. In Arkansas, voters have to decide whether or not to pass or reject issue 4. Issue 4 was a ballot initiative that asked Arkansas voters to legalize recreational marijuana use for people aged 21 and over. It also imposed a 10% sales tax on the sale of marijuana, which would be in addition to the 6.5% state sales tax and any other local sales tax that might already apply. As you probably have thought, issue 4 was rejected, so legal recreational marijuana will not be coming to Arkansas anytime soon. Sorry, guys. Now, let's jump over to California. I know you guys were probably waiting for me to talk about this state. Proposition 30. California voters were asked to vote on Proposition 30, which was a proposed tax on the wealthiest citizens of California. The tax revenue would be used to fund electric vehicles and charging stations and to fight wildfires. If Proposition 30 passed, it would have imposed a 1.75% tax on income over $2 million. That's a lot, but as you probably have already heard, Prop 30 did not pass. It failed. So this will not become law. I'm just going to raise my hand and say I did not vote for that. Okay. I'm not trying to have this 1.75% tax on my income because I make over $2 million. I thought that was crazy. So I voted against it. I mean, you can blast me in the comments if you want to, but I know exactly what my business owners around the state of California are doing for the state of California. And we need as much resources to be able to provide jobs. So that was why I voted in the way that I voted. Now, let's jump over to Colorado. I'm going to jump to the next state. We've already covered Arizona. We've already covered Alabama. We've already covered Arkansas. I even got to California. Here we are headed into Colorado. Now, Colorado had Amendment E. The first tax policy Colorado voters had to vote on was Amendment E. This amendment would change the Constitution of Colorado to extend the existing property tax exemption for disabled veterans to the surviving spouses of U.S. Armed Forces service members who died in the line of duty or veterans whose death resulted from a service-related injury or disease. And guess what? This amendment passed. And this is great, guys. We want to be able to help taxpayers who are, veterans or recovering from some form of a mental health illness after leaving the armed forces, and be able to have them be grandfathered in and get this exemption on their property taxes. So that way their property taxes aren't just skyrocketing every single year, right? And so this first tax policy, Amendment E in Colorado, you have an active role if you live in Colorado in helping out your veterans. So this is why I wanted to explain that. Now, there's some more stuff that I want to cover. Proposition FF. This proposition would help fund healthy meals for kids in public schools. Now, the funding would come by increasing Colorado income taxes for people who have taxable income of over $300,000 or more by limiting the state itemized or standard deductions to $12,000 for single filers and $16,000 for married filers. This proposition passed. Okay, so this was a big one. So I really want to go over this one more time. This is Proposition FF. Okay, so if you're following me right now, hopefully you're in a place where you're driving or something, you could pull over, write this down. If you're in the state of Colorado, this is this is huge for you. Okay, this proposition helps fund healthy meals for kids in public schools. I do think that's a big cause that we have to focus on. The funding would come by increasing taxes, and the taxes that they're going to increase are income taxes. So if you're working, you need to listen here. If you have taxable income of over $300,000 and you're somebody that is itemizing or taking the standard deduction, they have limited your ability to take itemized or standard deductions. The standard deduction is going to $12,000 for single filers and $16,000 for joint filers. Right now, guys, I know you know that joint filers can take a standard deduction of up to $25,550, right? So in this state, they're limiting that, and this proposition has already passed. Now, the next proposition that I want to cover is Proposition GG. We just went over Proposition FF. Now I'm going over Proposition GG. And guys, I'm a nerd, so I'm going to study all this stuff and then deliver it to you, hopefully in a digestible format so you don't get overwhelmed. But Proposition GG, this one is for voters in Colorado who are asked to choose in the title and fiscal summary for any Colorado ballot initiative that increases or decreases state income tax rates that has to include a table showing the average tax change for people in different income categories. And also this proposition was passed. So this proposition, if I can go over it again, is a ballot initiative, and it's going to either increase or decrease the state income tax rates. And it has to include a taxable table showing the average tax change for people in different income categories. This proposition was passed. Now, let's keep going because Colorado has a lot of issues here. They also jumped over to Proposition 121. Proposition 121 proposed reducing the flat income tax rate in Colorado from 4.55% to 4.4%. This proposition passed. So when you start to think about proposition like FF and GG and Proposition 121, these weren't just, created out of nowhere. They were thought through, right? If we're going to increase tax over here and limit standard deduction over here, we should drop state taxes over here. And this proposition was passed as well. So that covers the state of Colorado. Like, there was a lot going on in Colorado, but we can't leave off some of these other states. So let's jump over to Florida. If you're a Floridian, this is extremely important to you. So let's take some time on this one. The very first amendment is Amendment 1. This amendment would allow the Florida legislature to prohibit consideration of any home upgrades to improve resistance to flood damage in calculating the home's assessed value for property taxes. And Amendment 1 failed. So that was actually a pretty good one. Now, Amendment 3 is with the state amendment, the Florida state legislature would be able to create a brand new property tax homestead of up to $50,000 per property that is owned by law enforcement officers or correctional officers, firefighters, teachers, EMTs, child welfare service professionals, active duty members of the United States military, and any members of the Florida National Guard. Okay. This amendment, just so I can save you some time, failed. Okay. So that about sums up Florida. Not a whole lot, but it was still meaningful to discuss. Now, let's jump over to Florida's neighbor, which is Georgia. The first of 3 tax policy changes that the people of Georgia voted on was Amendment number 2. So there's 3, and I'm going to start off with Amendment number 2, so don't get confused here. Amendment number 2. This amendment would allow for municipal and county governments in the state of Georgia to provide temporary property tax relief for properties that is severely damaged or destroyed by a disaster in a nationally declared disaster area. This amendment was passed. Be honest, this amendment should have been passed a long time ago. As you know, Georgia gets hit with a lot of hurricanes. If you're somebody that has suffered from hurricanes and you've experienced some of these world disasters in living in Georgia, well, guess what? Rather than having to constantly pay your property taxes for a home that was blown away, you're going to get some property tax relief, especially if your home was severely damaged. So this amendment passed, and it kind of makes sense. Now, here's referendum A. This proposed referendum is a statewide property tax exemption for timber equipment and timber products held by timber producers. Referendum A was passed by voters, okay? This was a good one too. Now, the next referendum is referendum B. This referendum asks voters to decide if a property tax exemption for agricultural equipment and certain farm products that already existed in the state should be expanded to apply to entities compromising 2 or more family-owned farms and include dairy products and unfertilized poultry eggs as qualified farm products. This referendum also passed, helping out individuals who are living in this state. So a lot of the voting that we take part in, sometimes we don't even know what it's really doing. And if you watch this video, you can really see the impact of what our voting does. So I just want to encourage all of you guys who are watching this right now to get up and go out there and vote if you haven't already done so, if you're in a place where you can vote. All right, let's jump to the next state. Next state is Idaho. Oof, Karlton's getting hungry for some potatoes. Let's talk about Idaho. Idaho has what's called an advisory ballot. This was a non-binding question that asked Idaho voters if they would approve or disapprove of the state adopting a flat income tax rate of 5.8% and using $500,000 of the state's budget surplus for state tax rebates. The advisory ballot was passed by Idaho voters. Congratulations, guys. You guys have a flat income tax rate of 5.8% and you get $500,000 in state budget tax rebates, which could end up showing up on your tax return. So congratulations, my Idaho voters. Now, let's jump over to Louisiana. Louisiana has amendment number 2. This amendment to the Louisiana state constitution would expand property tax exemptions for disabled veterans, which we talked about, who meet certain criteria and their spouses. This amendment was passed. Now, amendment number 5, another constitutional amendment that was on the ballot in Louisiana. This amendment will allow local taxing authorities to levy a lower property tax rate while maintaining their ability to adjust the current authorized rates. As you could probably guess, this amendment was rejected by voters because it doesn't serve voters. All right, guys, let's jump into the next one. Amendment number 6. Louisiana has an amendment 6, and this proposed amendment would make it so that the assessed value of residential properties subject to the homestead exemption in Orleans Parish could not be increased by more than 10% of the previous year's value following a reappraisal for property tax purposes. At the time of this video, Amendment 6 has not yet been passed, so we'll keep an eye on that one as well. Now, what about the other amendments underneath the state? Amendment number 8. This was the last proposed amendment on the Louisiana ballot, and it would get rid of the requirement for certain homeowners who are disabled to recertify their income each year to keep their special assessment level of their home for property tax purposes. This amendment was passed. So this amendment's a big one. This amendment right here gets rid of the ability for certain taxpayers who have disabilities to constantly recertify their income each year just to keep their property taxes the way that they are. So it saves an additional step for taxpayers, and that's why this amendment was passed in the state of Louisiana. Let's jump over to the state of Maryland. Maryland has what's called Question 4. This question asks voters in Maryland to decide if they would like to legalize recreational marijuana for people who are 21 years of age or older and authorize the Maryland state government to tax recreational marijuana. Voters approved these changes, and now we have marijuana in Maryland. All right, guys, let's jump over to Massachusetts. Question number 1 for Massachusetts is voters were asked if they would like to amend the state constitution to add an additional 4% tax on income over $1 million to fund public education programs, transportation projects, and guess what? This proposed tax of the wealthy was approved in Massachusetts. Might not be a surprise to you if you know what kind of state Massachusetts is, but this was approved. And if you're somebody that lives in the state of Massachusetts and you earn over $1 million, guess what? You have an additional 4% tax coming your way. All right, guys, let's jump to Missouri. Amendment number 3. This amendment asks Missouri voters to decide if they want to legalize the use of recreational marijuana for adults aged 21 years of age or over, and to impose a 6% tax on the retail sale of marijuana. Amendment 3 was passed. We now have marijuana in the state of Missouri. Now, Washington is not too far from me. That's a distant neighbor. Washington has an advisory vote, and they had advisory vote 39. For this ballot item, Washington voters were asked that the recent increase of the aircraft fuel tax from 11 cents to 18 cents per gallon should be kept or done away with. Voters decided to do away with it. I don't know about you, but if I'm a Washington taxpayer and I'm trying to travel a lot for business, that means that I am increasing my costs that year, because let's be honest, inflation is already extremely high and fuel prices have skyrocketed since everything that's gone on with Russia and Ukraine. So now we're going to keep fuel price at 18% when we're in an economic downturn. That's why voters decided to do away with it. Staying in Washington, there is an advisory vote 40. For this vote, voters were asked to decide if the state should keep or get rid of a tax on transportation network companies, which are ride-sharing companies like Lyft, Uber. So this tax is used to fund workers' compensation for those drivers. Voters decided to repeal this tax. Okay, that's just something to keep aware of. Now let's jump over to the state of West Virginia. West Virginia has Amendment 2. The amendment would exempt certain personal property like machinery, equipment, inventory, and vehicles that are used directly in a business activity from personal property taxes in the state. This amendment was rejected. Okay. Now we are covering quite a lot of amendments and questions. So hopefully this is giving you some insight into what your voting power does for you. Hopefully after watching this, you have a much better understanding of all the major state tax changes that have occurred as a result of the 2022 mid-elections. If your state has passed a new tax rule, then please make sure that you keep this in mind when you're paying income taxes. If you have any questions about the new tax changes, what's gone into place, or what could be going into place, then click on the link below to schedule a consultation with my team. You can also sign up for our course, Tax Alchemy, by clicking the link in the description below. It's pretty much the only way to work with me. In this course, I teach you the games of the tax system. And I'm also going to show you how to invest in real estate and use accelerated depreciation to offset your W-2 and 1099 income. Majority of the people who are inside of Tax Alchemy love spending time on coaching calls with me, where I get to understand their specific situations and be able to help tailor a tax plan that's going to be able to serve them for the long term. I look forward to seeing you inside of that training, but if I don't, I'll see you on the next video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. You know what it is. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.